Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and this is my review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 8, Crisis Point 2, Paradoxous. Spoiler warning, of course, if you have not seen up through the end of Season 3, Episode 8 of Lower Decks, blah, 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 blah. Alright, so Lower Decks is back after what I called the worst episode of the series last week. We're back on track, which I thought that it would be. Typically, the last three episodes, 8, 9, and 10 of the first two seasons have been my three favorite in different order. Last season it was more 8 and 9. The season before was more 9 and 10. But it's typically those last three. And this year we got that bonus episode 6, the Deep Space Nine episode, which was surprisingly great for a middle of the season episode. And in fact, at this point, as much as I really loved this week's episode, I would still probably give the edge to episode 6, that Deep Space Nine episode, as my favorite of the season so far. So I can't complain about that. So this week we are back to what makes Lower Decks such a great show that was sorely lacking from last week's episode, such as good character stories with actual character growth. Yes, I'm still making knocks on last week's episode. Funny jokes. There was a lot of great parodies in this episode, a lot of laugh out loud moments in this episode, also sorely lacking from last week's episode. And I do have to compare it, though, to Crisis Point 1, which was the penultimate episode of Season 1, because this is the sequel. And of course, it's not as good. And I think that they kind of softened that blow by making a lot of sequel jokes all throughout this episode. A lot of meta jokes about sequels and how sequels aren't as good. There's a comment about how this is just a financial obligation. And I love Mariner's constant references to the Vindictiverse. Also, they reference a couple of bad to mediocre movies. They reference Star Trek V, of course, which is, I think, the worst Star Trek movie ever made. They reference the Kelvin universe. They reference, I would say, the ending there is like Generations, which I actually think is the best Next Generation movie, because I think they all suck, and I think that one's mediocre. But it's... A lot of people think it's a bad movie, so they reference a lot of like kind of bad to mediocre sequels. So that is all really great stuff, and it softens the blow a little bit. You expect this to not be as good as the original Crisis Point, but for me, the main reason why it's not quite as good as the original Crisis Point, because I still think the original Crisis Point has the best character story of Lower Decks. With the Mariner story, I don't think the Boimler story here measures up to that. But I still think it was a good character story. We also get a good character story with Tendi, surprisingly. Wasn't expecting that really. More of the B plot, but get a good story there too. So all in all, fabulous episode. So good to have Lower Decks back on track after last week's disaster. So now let me go ahead and break down each of the two plots. I'll start with the A plot, which is the Boimler plot with Mariner in it as well. Okay, so let me start with the Boimler and Mariner storyline. And it is worth noting that this is a return to the classic format of Lower Decks, where they have Boimler and Mariner going off here, and Tendi and Rutherford going off there. And that is something that I complained about in previous seasons that they were doing way too often. But I don't mind it here, because I believe this is the first time we've used this exact format this season, so that's totally fine. My complaint was it was too formulaic. They were doing it every single week, and we weren't getting to see how does Boimler interact with Tendi, how does Rutherford interact with Mariner, and different things. Like it was getting too repetitive, and especially in season 1, that was my main complaint. So that doesn't mean that I wish to never ever see these pairings again. Boimler and Mariner are best friends. Rutherford and Tendi are really close friends and have that on again off, or the will they won't they thing going on, which I don't like. But they do make sense as a pairing, so that is totally fine. Um, Now we start off with this opening scene, and I knew that there was going to be a Crisis Point 2 this season. I assumed it would be episode 9, but we get it in episode 8. So with the opening scene, I assumed, oh, this must be Crisis Point 2, because this doesn't make any sense otherwise. That they come in with the Wayfarer, and with Captain... what was he called? Not Captain Vindicta, but I forget what his captain name was. they come in to save the day, and right away it's a holodeck episode. And I love how Mariner's just kind of, oh, this is not as good as mine. He's just critiquing the plot. And I mentioned this earlier, but the reference to the Kelvin universe, when Mariner was just like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, go to an alternate timeline where there's younger versions of ourselves played by different actors? And Tendi was like, yeah, that's a bit of a stretch. And I had to pause it. I had to pause it to allow myself to laugh for a couple of minutes, because I was laughing so loud that if I didn't pause it, I wouldn't have heard the next lines, because there was kind of rapid fire lines. They just moved right on to the next line. And so I had to pause it to laugh, because that was so funny. I hate the Kelvin Universe movies. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but so any time to poke fun at them. Yes, it is a stretch. Yes, it was a way for them to not have to stick with canon and have lazy writing, so they invented the stupid Kelvin timeline. Anyways, I appreciated that joke a lot. But then Boimler leaves because he's called away by Ransom. He comes back really sad, and then at first we don't know what has happened. It's obvious there has been a change. Like something happened with this conversation with Ransom, and we see that with his interactions with the obvious love interest, which Boimler had mentioned before. There's going to be a romance, and Boimler is not interested. Now, I have heard some people speculate that he could be asexual based on the earlier episode. I think it was in the first episode when he was on the Picard winery and actually they make raisins, and all the different women were obviously trying to have sex with him, and he was oblivious. I kind of read that as more being oblivious, and I read this more as he's too depressed to get into the romance story now. He clearly wrote that romance story, so he has an interest in it. And he definitely would have been all into it had he not gotten that news from Ransom. So that's how I read it. I don't necessarily read him as asexual. Maybe he will turn out to be that, but that's not how I'm reading it so far. Boimler then wants to go off on this side quest and ignore the main plot of the movie because he's trying to find the meaning of life. And by the way, I love all the different background characters, and one of them is like, we're all characters in a holodeck program. And I was like, whoa, you blew my mind there, man. He wants to go off with this preacher dude to find the meaning of life. And I like how Mariner was just like, oh, no, these are just side characters. And then the computer apparently can, improvise. And if our characters in the holodeck, or our people in the holodeck, wanted to go off on a side quest, the computer will just kind of roll with it and improvise that. And I never understood in holodecks how one set of characters could be in one place and another set of characters can be another place, but they're all in this little room with grids on it. But it's always worked in holodecks that way. Anyways, so Boimler is now going off on this side quest. Mariner says this sucks. She's comparing it to her movie, and they're getting in an argument, and then Mariner gets pissed off and leaves. And that's when she finds out that William Boimler has died, so we think at this point, and that's what's getting Boimler down. So she then goes back into the holodeck, uh, because there's another nice call out to companionship and friendship, which has been a running theme all throughout the season, which I really appreciate a lot. And Mariner realizes, I'm his friend. I gotta go and help him. So Mariner returns to find Boimler in the brig, and they escape, and then they go attack that one dude. And I love how Mariner was like, "Oh, this is the moment where you give the great speech to turn his mind," and he just starts beating the crap out of the guy. And I love the Knick-Knack reveal. Knick-Knack, for some reason, I was thinking, is this a character I should know? Like, he seems familiar somehow. Like, I guess it's completely new. But I love Barrett. It was like, oh, cool, Knick-Knack reveal in the third act. Like, that was really fun. The whole thing with the backstory, I actually liked that pun. But like pulling in his back to make the map, that was kind of gross, but it was kind of pretty funny as well. So then they go to Star Trek 5. I loved all of this. I loved the Star Trek 5 reference and how I'm glad they didn't straight up do like the god from Star Trek 5, but it was clearly making references to Star Trek 5, even though if it was a different being. And I loved how it was the holodeck. It was just generating inspirational quotes. Boimler was really frustrated. I mean, what did he expect from a holodeck program? The holodeck is not going to give you the meaning of life. But I buy it because Boimler is really down on himself. He's not feeling really good right now, so I get it. But, you're not going to get the meaning of life from the holodeck. And then we get the Nexus moment where he gets knocked out, and I love the fake out that it has the Kirk mailbox, and I'm like, oh, they got William Shatner for this? Oh, okay. Oh no, it's George Takei. Yeah, I like George Takei way better than William Shatner. I'm sorry. I have talked on my channel before how I don't like William Shatner as a human being. I don't like him as an actor. I just don't particularly like him, and I love George Takei. So I was very happy for the fake out, actually. And I love how he introduces himself by saying, "Oh my," which is George Takei's catchphrase. It's not something Sulu says, but I love it. I loved this whole thing. This was fantastic. And he basically tells Boimler, the meaning of life is not to worry about the meaning of life. Just live life, which is a wise advice. And I love how Boimler repeats back to him, and he's like, yeah, that's literally what I just said. That's just fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad that George Takei did this. I'm so happy. We don't know how much longer George Takei is going to be, with us. Hopefully a little while longer. I think he's getting up there in age. So I love that he was able to do this Lower Decks cameo. Hopefully he'll still be around for a few more years, but I don't want to write his eulogy yet. But I love that he was able to do this. That is fantastic. So then at the end of this, I will go ahead and follow this through to the ending, and then I'll do a quick talk about the Rutherford and Tendi storyline. Mariner ends with saying, yeah, at least there's no cliffhanger. Cliffhangers are dumb. And of course, I knew they were going to go to a cliffhanger after that. Which I enjoyed that. I do like some of the meta things that they did in this episode. And we get the reveal on a Defiant class ship, maybe not the Defiant itself, although it does have a cloaking device, that William Boimler is still alive, and he's going to join Section 31. Very much shades of Thomas Riker joining the Maquis, also with the Defiant being involved in it, so that's very much the vibes I was getting there. But I love the knock on Star Trek Discovery's version of Section 31, where he's like, why do we wear these badges to show ourselves? I thought we were a secret organization. And she's like, you could die again, right? I cracked up laughing. Is this the first Discovery joke? in Lower Decks. I can't recall another one, but Discovery's the only one that did that with the badges. There wasn't in Deep Space Nine or Enterprise, so that's clearly not Discovery's version of Section 31, and that cracked me up. Now let me go ahead and backtrack and move over to the Rutherford and Tendi stuff. So we get the B plot, which ironically was supposed to be the A plot of the movie that Boimler is doing. Boimler has lost interest in that because he's going off on his side quest. So then Tendi kind of takes the lead. Boimler makes her acting captain so he can go off and do his side quest. And so we got Tendi and Rutherford doing what was supposed to be the main plot of the movie. And it involves the Paragami or whatever that was called. I loved it in the beginning when Mariner was like, yes, I know, origami, I get it. I get time folds on itself, whatever. I love how the plot was just kind of nonsensical. Like, oh, there's this telepathic octopus on this planet that they're trying, like a really convoluted time travel plot, and like they just put time travel in just to make money. This may not have been a direct reference to First Contact because I appear to be the only one who recognizes First Contact for what it is, which was just a farce. It was just a bunch of corporate board people sitting around a boardroom with suits saying, oh, you know how we can make money? Let's combine the Borg and time travel, and who cares if it makes any sense? I'd probably be the only one who use it that way, but that's what this seemed like to me, that they were just like, oh, let's just do this nonsensical time travel plot because we'll make money kind of thing. That's what I was getting from it. And that leads them back into 1982. Another kind of Star Trek 4 reference with the guy with the stereo. We got that reference in Picard season 2. One of the only moments in Picard season 2 that I enjoyed, actually. And I love how Rutherford was like, no, we've got to try on their clothes. And what's a time travel movie worth anything if you don't take their clothes? Very clearly a reference to Terminator is what I saw there. And he's like, these clothes don't fit. We need to beat up bigger punks. That was good. But that ties into the running thread of this plot, which is Tendi feeling like Rutherford is not taking this seriously enough, which we find out at the end that Tendi sees that as Rutherford not taking her seriously. But before I dive more into that, I do also want to just touch more on this time travel plot and how ridiculous it is, and how they then end up at the beginning of the Federation, which looked a lot like the scene at the end of Star Trek Enterprise and the episode that everyone loves, These Are the Voyages, but we don't get a Captain Archer cameo. I kind of would have been surprised if we did. I don't know. For some reason, I just didn't think Scott Bakula would do this. And this is made up by the George Takei cameo, as far as I'm concerned. But I love how Tendi was just like, oh, I guess they just gave up. The Romulans gave up on the octopus thing. They're just straight up going to blow up the Federation now. Again, bad time travel plot in a movie just to make money. I love it. Love it. But the heart of this is we get to reveal that Tendi kind of would like to be on the path to be a captain. And this is something she's just now really realizing. She's like, oh yeah, I'd like to be a captain too. I don't know. I have sort of mixed feelings on it because it seems like a diversion. But this might be interesting because how's Boimler going to react to this later on? Because that's kind of Boimler's thing, is wanting to be captain. And Tendi was always supposed to go for science, which she still can. Be a science officer and become captain. Look at Spock. But she's realizing for the first time, yeah, I want to be captain. And she just felt like Rutherford wasn't taking her seriously as the captain. But really, Rutherford just wasn't taking it seriously because it's just a silly holodeck program. And he's just like, this is just for fun. Like, this isn't a real thing. Once Rutherford finds out that that's what Tendi was thinking, he's like, oh no, I think you would be a great captain. And then he falls in line. Oh, Captain Tendi, yeah, and supports her. And that was very sweet. As much as I did get tired of the Rutherford and Tendi dynamic in previous seasons, I'm glad actually to see that back, see that connection again. I'm also glad to see. Hopefully, they've abandoned the will they won't they thing. I don't know. They're probably still going to drag that on. I'm not a fan of the will they won't they thing, but I don't. I didn't really get heavy will they won't they vibes in this. It was more of a friendship thing. So I really enjoyed that. Now let me go ahead and wrap this up and give my rating out of 10 for this episode. All right, now we get to the point where I give my rating out of 10. And I'm doing something here that I've never done before, which is I actually recorded a segment where I gave my rating and went and rewatched my review. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought I'm going to change my rating. So I'm re recording this. So originally, I gave this an 8.5. But after thinking more about it, my rating for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 8 is a 9. I'm going to up it to a 9. I think my original logic for the 8.5 was that I wanted to differentiate this between this episode and Episode 6, Hear All, Trust Nothing, which I gave a 9 to. And I can't remember what I gave Crisis Point 1. Hopefully I gave it a 10 because it should be a 10. I might have only given it a 9. If that's the case, then I want to definitely differentiate that because I definitely think Crisis Point 1 was better than this. But just the more I think about it, this deserves a solid 9, not just an 8.5. So I loved this episode. Still a close second to episode 6 for the season. But I absolutely love that we can now forget about that awful episode 7 and really, really enjoy this great film parody with good character stories. Even if it didn't quite measure up to the original, it was still a lot of fun, and it's definitely a 9 out of 10 for me. Thank you so much for watching. Please join me next week as I discuss episode 9. Very curious where they're going the next 2 episodes. I feel like there's a lot of hanging story threads, and they're going to have to save some of it for season 4. So we'll see about that. Please join me as I talk about it, and please subscribe if you have not already. Hit the bell for notifications and all that good stuff, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.